Hello and welcome to the Series B podcast. I'm your host, Greg Pokricki. Your guest today is Mike Pell, Envisioneer at the Microsoft Garage and co-inventor of the Apple stylized font menu and Adobe PDF. Mike discusses Microsoft's fast design innovation methods, how he spotted need early throughout his career, and details why Microsoft finds it important to support an ecosystem like Buffalo. All right, Mike, thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
So for the uninitiated, tell us about the Microsoft Garage.
The Microsoft Garage is the company's worldwide innovation program. Originally was thought about to help people bring their ideas and their passion to work and figure out how to do something with it. That's evolved over the years to being a worldwide program that not only helps our employees to be able to move ideas forward, but also our customers and partners. We work a lot with universities and in companies, startups around the world, really helping to show how artificial intelligence and other technologies are helping to speed up the innovation process these days. So it's a lot of fun for me personally to be able to see what people are doing with all this.
Awesome. And your title is Envisioneer. The podcast graphic will say Envisioneer. For those that don't know, what does that mean to you?
So I made up that term because I'm both a designer and a technologist. I'm an entrepreneur, and I've been in corporate America for a long time. But to me, an Envisioneer is someone who has enough vision to be able to imagine what's possible, but is also enough of an engineer or a builder to be able to go out and figure out how to bring it to life.
So you invented or co-invented Apple's stylized font menu and the PDF. And I heard you talk on a different podcast that innovation should feel obvious. And, those things probably now do feel obvious, but at the time seemed completely foreign to, pretty much everybody, probably except you at the moment.
Yeah.
How do you, how do you spot need early, I suppose?
hmm It's funny. A lot of innovations seem to be because they're fixing a problem or they're addressing something that just isn't the way that it should be. There's other types of innovation that are much more interesting to me personally, where you're actually looking at the opportunities. So it's not problem based, it's opportunity based. And so when you see that all of a sudden you could do something that you could never do before, that is a pretty clear sign that it's probably innovative. I always say there's no such thing as incremental innovation, meaning there is incremental improvement, there's stepwise change, but a true breakthrough, a true innovation is a leap forward. And it turns out, in my experience, when you see a true innovation, like something that is really a breakthrough, oftentimes it does seem completely obvious when you see it and you say, oh, of course it should be like that. How could it not be like that? One good example is when the iPhone was introduced and the notion of pinching and zooming, right? Like just being able to just put your fingers on the screen and zoom up, zoom down. It
Right.
seems so natural. Like, how did we ever do anything before that? Well, it turns out we had to build really complicated UI to do all of that stuff before. So when you get something right, it just feels natural and it feels completely obvious.
Yep. I heard you on a few podcasts talk about the importance of timing and sequencing in innovation. How do you reconcile the difference between like visionary and premature?
Yeah. Well, I always joke that I'm from the future, and that's a lot of fun for me because I do have a lot of vision. I do sort of have I guess, a knack for seeing what's going to be next. The problem in business is that you don't want to be ahead of what's going on. You want to be just ahead of what's needed right now. And that turns into a real problem because people who are super passionate about something that they can see very clearly and they know doesn't exist, oftentimes entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs within companies, they get so enamored, they fall so in love with their idea because they can see it so clearly, but the market's not ready or their customers don't really need it right now. Like it's wonderful, that's great, like wow, so that's really amazing, but I don't need to pay for that right now. That's really the issue. And you'll hear many people who talk about entrepreneurship sort of pose this very simple question. That's a great idea. Can you get someone to pay for it right now? And that is really the heart, and it is no more complicated than that. So if your vision takes you past the point where somebody would be willing to believe that it's important and they would invest in it right now, or they would pay for it right now, then you're ahead of your time and probably good to put that on the back burner and look at something else.
You're trying to instill innovation, teach people how to innovate. Can you tell people about your fast design theory and the idea of moving uncomfortably fast?
Yeah, oftentimes when you're working on a new project, whether it's a new business or you're just working on a project within your existing company, people want to have a lot of data to help make decisions. They want to have consensus among their coworkers and management. They want to, figure out if they, have all the right steps in place and the right information. That's great. And it's very responsible to do all of that. We don't have enough time to do that, at the speed of business right now. So we have to find ways to be able to work faster. That doesn't mean necessarily introducing technologies, although they can help to accelerate. It's more like a mindset shift that, you know what, I think I know what to do. I'm going to go try it. Just see what happens. I can adjust if I need to. I can stop and go do something else if it's really not working. But the idea of like talking and talking and talking, gathering data and like doing surveys and like doing all this stuff before you do anything was not helpful. And so here within the Microsoft Garage, we have a saying, which is we're doers, not talkers. And that doesn't mean that we don't discuss things. And, like, of course we do, but we love to roll up our sleeves and just try stuff. And so people sort of have to have this bias for action, we believe, to really try to experiment and to be more curious about what's happening. Part of that is um, knowing that you have to be able to work at a speed that is probably uncomfortable to you because you're not going to have all the information. You're not going to have enough data. You're not going to have, a clear signal that this is absolutely the right thing to do. You have to use the existing data that you have and some gut instinct, right, to go figure out if this is really the right thing. So being uncomfortable is probably a good thing when you're trying to be innovative or at least bringing new ideas to life.
What's a good first step for a company that, has those aspirations, but maybe doesn't know where to start to ingrain that ethos, near their company, whether small business or a larger enterprise? Like what would your advice be to a company? What's their first move?
One thing that we do all the time is we run hackathons. And the reason so a hackathon, for people not familiar, is an event where you issue a challenge. People form teams. They work on the challenge for a set period of time, whether it's, a day or a few days. And then you're responsible to demo what you've done so people can see. Sometimes there's judging involved, and sometimes it is a competition. People win, whatever. But the more important part is that anybody should be able to participate in the hackathon, not just engineers, not just designers, salespeople, marketers, HR, every different aspect of a business. All of those roles are very critically important to a project team because everyone has a different perspective. They have different experiences. And so that act of issuing a challenge, putting teams together, working through it, getting like a worker prototype that you can go test with people, that will show the company what the appetite is for doing more experimentation and being more curious, and also maybe some talent that they didn't know that they were sitting on. So it's a very easy way, whether it's a half day or a full day or a couple days, just run a hackathon and see what happens. See the kind of enthusiasm, and the kind of projects that come out of that. I think most times you're pretty impressed with what happens.
And then as you zoom out and not just think company specific, but for us as an ecosystem, a mid-size kind of second, third tier ecosystem of Buffalo, like what advice do you have for a community that's trying to mature its innovation economy and make sure it's maybe not just innovation theater, which I've heard you talk about before. We're not just performing innovation, right, but actually building something durable.
Yeah. It's a really important point. Um, Many times, we'll see companies that have innovation programs and departments and, people who are in these roles. And, they're acting sort of like the arbiters of what's good and bad and what's needed and not needed. But you have the advantage of literally being a community of people, right, who are very different backgrounds and very different, ideas of what's important. So the thing that I think that Buffalo has in the greater area is that you can figure out what is really important to the area, what is important to the families, what's important to the city, and don't think about the technology first. Think about what you're trying to accomplish, as a a collective, and then how do you apply technology to help you get to that end? These can be very small experiments, and so that's how I would approach this: is figure out of all the things that you could do, what would actually have the most impact right now that we could do reasonably and do it quickly, just to get some small wins and to sort of build on that.
I think the proliferation of AI can speed up probably a lot of these processes for people, especially on like research and strategy side. But I mean, you talked at the top when you're talking about your title and it's ingrained in much of your work, like design and taste and judgment. Like, what role do you think those skills have in this new kind of AI first world?
We talk about this all the time here in the garage, and also I work with universities here in the area. It's really important for everyone, not only students, but everybody, to realize that we have to be willing to learn some new things. You don't have to be an expert necessarily, but you have to be willing to try, right? Because all of our jobs, all of our roles, all of our educational experiences, all of it is changing right now very quickly. And being flexible and being open-minded and being able to just try is probably going to be the most important aspect of any of our careers going forward. People talk about being lifelong learners, or being open to change, like you hear it referred to as the growth mindset. That is the critical part to this. It's not being a super expert in how to use a particular agent or AI technology, although those are very helpful and they're accelerants. It's more a mindset thing. It's I'm willing to learn how to do new things. I'm willing to learn how to be better at what I'm already good at. That's kind of the key as far as whatever your skills. Like for me, it's design and technology and business. Like I love all its different things. But if you're great at cooking, like you're running a food truck business, there's probably things where you could be asking, your favorite AI assistant, like, so what is this area really, into, like historically, like, what are the foods that people really, really love, that, and you might get ideas for things that are not on your menu right now. So we find that the AI systems that we build and the agents can actually be great collaborators. So not just tools, but literally help you to have ideas about running your business or expanding it or getting it to new markets. Or maybe you're not great at accounting. This could actually teach you a little bit very, very quickly about some key things you need to know. So I would say think about some of the newer AI technologies and agents and so forth as another team member or a trusted advisor for what you want to do.
The Microsoft Garage has churned out a ton of cool projects. Tell our audience one that you're particularly proud of, or something you want to hang your hat on there.
So we run the world's biggest hackathon, as we were talking about earlier, every year. Last year we had 74,000 Microsoft employees join us worldwide, to participate in this event where you think of ideas, you form teams, you sort of bring it together. But many years ago, I was in our headquarters in Redmond, Washington, in the garage, and there was a guy standing in the corner of the garage who was holding an Xbox D-pad, an Xbox controller with a screwdriver. He was prying it open. And Jeff Ramos, who runs the garage program, and I walked over and we said, "Hey, Matt, what are you doing?" He said, "Oh." He said, I'm a gamer. I have this idea." He said, like, my buddies and I like love to play Xbox, but we're all vets, and some of them have actually lost their arm in the war. It's really hard for them to game on the Xbox with only one hand. I had this crazy idea of hooking something up, kind of like a drum pad, to the controller, so that they could use their foot, or a different part of their body to control some of this. I said, "Wow, that's a really interesting idea." Not knowing if it would ever work or not, we said, "Hey, we're having our Microsoft Global Hackathon next week. Why don't you form a team and try to get some people to help you with this idea? He said, "Okay, that sounds like a good idea." And he did. He found people who were not only game enthusiasts, but people who loved accessibility and software and, all different types of roles. So within just a few days, they built a working prototype of this thing, right? Which is, again, looked like a drum pad and Xbox controller hooked up with wires and circuit boards and like all this like crazy looking, mad scientist stuff. And at the end of the hackathon event, we had something called the science fair, where people can walk around and see what everybody else has done. Turns out our executives were walking around that year, and the person who was running the Xbox team just happened to walk by, saw this Xbox controller hooked up to a drum machine with all these weird wire wrap and, circuit boards coming out of it, and said, "What is that?" And they gave them a demo, explained how this was, intended to help people, who had trouble gaming, right? So had some type of physical disability that prevented them from, fully enjoying. And the person said, "Wow, you have to show this to my team. I've never even seen something like this. I would love for you to come over." So out of the hackathon, fast forward a little bit, the hack team went over, demoed it. The Xbox team went, "Wow, we think there's something here. Okay, great. Let's work on this." Fast forward a little bit more. This becomes a product called the Xbox Adaptive Controller. Fast forward a little bit more, that became Microsoft's very first Super Bowl ad, which unlocked tens of thousands of people to be able to game in a way that they were never able to do before. So all the way from a single person having an idea of how to help his buddies, like a very personal reason, to unlocking gaming, for so many people around the world. That's a pretty great hack story.
Yeah, that's incredible. And we will be sure to link to the Garage's website, which has a couple of cool success stories in the description of the podcast.
Mhm.
So Microsoft has actively supported and invested here in Buffalo, partnering with our organization Tech Buffalo through its TechSpark program. When you look at a place in an ecosystem like Buffalo, what to you makes it worth investing in from a Microsoft perspective?
Mhm. Well, I mean, having grown up on the East Coast, I know that Buffalo is very beautiful. It's also a little tough, when it gets cold. So I love that what we find is the best entrepreneurs, the best entrepreneurs, the best hackers are incredibly tenacious. There are people who will see something through, who will like run it down and figure out if it can really work or not. And it always sort of impressed me that seems to be the spirit of the people in the Buffalo area. And so I think that that's a great premise for going off and doing amazing things.
Awesome, Mike. Well, thank you so much for your time. Before I let you go, we are going to end on a segment that we're calling Last Call. It's a couple hard hitting, quick questions for you. So, first, what is your favorite productivity tool right now?
Copilot.
Great choice. I thought that might be the one. You're on a podcast right now. When you listen to podcasts, at what speed are you listening to them at?
Normal speed. I don't want it to sound like chattering mice.
Fair enough. What's your go to coffee order?
Oh, so I love Cafe Vita, which is a Seattle-based coffee. So just getting a latte from Cafe Vita in Seattle. And there's actually here in New York City, there's a Cafe Vita, a satellite outpost. So that's always my favorite.
Okay, book or TV show that you'd recommend?
Well, big Star Trek fan. So, any of the Star Trek series is what I would recommend. And, as far as books, I've always loved Neil Stephenson and Michael Crichton books. So, any one of their works would be worthwhile.
Awesome. And you are on a Buffalo centric podcast right now. So if you were to order some chicken wings, do you prefer the drumstick or the flat?
Well, I think I would go with the drumstick.
Awesome.
Not too spicy for me, or else I have to douse it in, blue cheese or ranch or something.
Yep. All right. We'll get 10 medium next time you're in town. Thank you very much.
There you go. Thank you.